want you to just close your eyes for a second and picture a scene.
Okay.
It's the one we've all seen 100 times in movies, you know? The lights are stark, the music swells, and you hear that piercing alarm.
That code blue.
Someone shouts, "Code blue, room 304," and suddenly the hallway is just a blur. Doctors, nurses, they're all sprinting.
The crash cart. You can almost hear the wheels squeaking.
Exactly. It's all high stakes, high adrenaline. It's heroic. It's saving a life at the very last second.
It makes for great TV, for sure. Everyone holds their breath.
Right. But here's the uncomfortable question for today, and it's really the hook for this entire deep dive. What if that scene, as heroic as it looks, actually represents a massive system failure?
That's a heavy way to start, but you're right to ask it.
Well,
because if you're doing chest compressions, if that crash cart is flying down the hall, it almost always means you missed something.
you missed the signs.
10, 20, maybe 50 subtle signs that patient was crashing hours ago.
So the true measure of a hospital's success shouldn't be how well they rescue someone during a code.
Yeah.
It should be making sure the code never happens in the first place.
The goal should be silence. I mean, the goal should be boredom, really.
Boredom, right.
Because boredom in a hospital means you caught the problem long before it became a crisis.
Which brings us to what we're digging into today. We're looking at a concept that just flips the script on how hospitals handle emergencies.
The stat nurse model.
The stat nurse model. And before you tune out thinking, oh, great, another medical acronym, just hold on. This isn't just a job title.
No, it's a very specific innovation.
Designed by a man named Timothy Simpson. He's a CCRN based in Florida with over 22 years of ICU experience. And he didn't just tweak the system. He kind of reinvented the architecture of safety on the floor.
And what's so striking about his work is that he hasn't just built a better response team. He's designed a role that functions as, well, he calls it a force multiplier.
I love that phrase. When I was reading the materials, I put a pin right in it. Force multiplier. It sounds so tactical.
It is. It's a military term.
Right.
In combat, a force multiplier is a tool or a strategy that dramatically increases the effectiveness of the troops you already have.
And Simpson is applying that to the hospital ward.
Exactly. He's arguing that one specifically trained, specifically empowered nurse can make every other nurse on that floor smarter, faster, and ultimately safer.
Okay, so the mission for our deep dive is clear. We're going to dismantle the traditional idea of the rapid response team.
And see why it might be becoming obsolete.
And we're going to look at how the stat nurse model works as a strategic leadership tool that actually lives at the bedside, not in some corner office.
And from this, the CEO's perspective, we're going to see how this one role sits at the convergence of three huge pressures in healthcare right now.
Which are?
Clinical safety, keeping patients alive, staff retention, keeping nurses from burning out.
Yeah.
And financial stewardship.
Keeping the hospital's doors open.
Basically, yeah.
It's pretty rare to find one single role that pulls all those levers at once. So let's unpack this. To really get why Simpson's model is so disruptive, we have to start with the status quo. What's the normal way hospitals handle these emergencies outside of an ICU?
Well, the traditional model is what's called a rapid response team, or an RRT, or a code team.
Okay.
And these teams are vital, don't get me wrong. But they are, by their very nature, reactive.
Reactive.
They're like firefighters sitting in the station house.
Yeah.
They wait.
They wait for the disaster.
Exactly. They rely on a trigger. A bedside nurse has to notice something's wrong, get worried enough, and then physically push a button or make a call.
And once that button is pushed, they rush in.
They do. They focus on immediate resuscitation, stabilization. They fix the acute problem, and then most of the time, they either leave or they transfer the patient to the ICU.
They're the break glass in case of emergency crew.
A perfect description. And Timothy Simpson looked at that and said, that's too late. The stat nurse operates in a completely different way. They don't have a station house. They don't wait for a button.
They're just walking around?
They are operating continuously. They are, and I mean this in the best way, prowling the halls.
Prowling. I like that.
Yeah.
It suggests they're looking for trouble before it starts.
That's it. Proactively rounding. They go to the high-risk units. They look at high-risk patients who haven't crashed yet.
So who would that be? A patient who just got out of the ICU?
Exactly. Maybe someone whose heart rate is just creeping up a little bit. They're not waiting for an invitation to get involved. And Simpson is really clear on this point. He calls the role a clinical leadership liaison.
Okay, that sounds a bit like a corporate title. What does it actually look like on a Tuesday afternoon on the 4th floor?
It means they have the authority to fix the potholes before the car hits them.
I like that analogy.
So let's say a patient is looking a little shaky, but not code blue shaky. A traditional RRT might not even get called yet.
Because the vitals are still technically okay?
Right. But the stat nurse, who's just rounding, sees it. They can step in, they can facilitate an escalation, get the right med ordered, get a doctor to the bedside right now.
So they operate in the gray zone.
The gray zone is where patients die. The stat nurse owns that space.
Yeah.
Simpson designed the role to include throughput, escalation, early recognition. It's not just a pair of hands for CPR. It's an operations manager for clinical safety.
So if the RRT is the tow truck driver who shows up after the crash, the stat nurse is the air traffic controller preventing the collision in the first place.
That is the perfect analogy. And it's not just clinical, it's operational. Simpson sees it as an integrated safety, quality, and ops position. It bridges the gap.
Okay, I want to pivot to something I think it's just huge right now, maybe even bigger than the clinical side for some hospitals, and that's the staff.
Yeah.
We all know about the nursing shortage. Burnout is at an all-time high. So how does throwing another specialized nurse into the mix help, the rookie nurse who's just overwhelmed on the night shift?
This is one of the most brilliant parts of Simpson's design. He saw that you cannot separate patient safety from staff well-being.
You're connected.
They're the same thing.
Yeah.
And the stat nurse acts as an on-the-floor mentor.
Not a supervisor with a clipboard, though.
No, and that is a critical distinction. They are not there to write you up. They're there to coach you.
So walk me through it.
Okay, imagine you're a new nurse, 6 months out of school. Your patient is breathing a little fast, looking a little pale. You're scared.
And you don't know if you should call the doctor at 3 a.m. because you don't want to look stupid if it's nothing.
The classic imposter
You're
syndrome.
paralyzed, exactly. Now imagine a stat nurse walks in. Someone with 22 years of ICU experience, like Simpson. They don't just take over and push you aside.
What do?
They stand beside you. They ask, what do you see here? What do you think is happening? Let's look at this together. They're coaching on assessment, on critical thinking in real time.
That has to change the entire vibe on the floor. It creates psychological safety. We talk about this concept all the time in high-reliability organizations.
Right.
If your staff are afraid to ask for help, patients die, period. By having this expert who is constantly present and supportive, it reduces moral distress. It builds confidence. The bedside nurse knows they are not alone.
And that has to have a direct impact on retention. I mean, if I feel supported, if I feel like I'm learning and not drowning, I'm way more likely to stay in my job.
Absolutely. It turns a high-stress, sink-or-swim environment into a supported learning environment. Simpson built mentorship into the design for that very reason. It helps them navigate those difficult conversations, with physicians or leadership. The stat nurse backs them up.
Okay, so we have happier nurses, safer patients. But we promise the business side. The stuff that hospital execs lose sleep over. They live and die by metrics. How does the stat nurse move the needle on the spreadsheets?
Let's start with a really grim one. Failure to rescue.
Yeah, that term always gives me the chills. Failure to rescue.
It should. It means a death that results from a complication that wasn't recognized or treated in time.
And Simpson's model.
It targets this directly. By catching those subtle early warning signs, the slight drop in blood pressure, the change in mental status, and intervening before the patient fully decompensates, you prevent the failure to rescue. You turn a potential tragedy into a managed event.
And stopping that crash helps with another huge metric. Length of stay. LOS.
Right, because if a patient crashes and ends up on a ventilator in the ICU, their hospital stay just got weeks longer.
And way more expensive.
Exactly. By intervening early, the stat nurse prevents those complications. Maybe the patient just needs a medication adjustment and they go home on time. Reducing length of stay is the holy grail for hospital throughput.
Throughput, that's the flow of patients in and out.
Yes. Think of the hospital like a highway. If the cars on the highway, the patients in beds aren't moving, the on-ramps get clogged.
And the on-ramps are the emergency department and the PSCU, the recovery room?
Exactly. And when the ED is overflowing because there are no beds upstairs, it's a hospital-wide crisis.
So the stat nurse helps unclog that highway.
Directly. By managing patients better on the floors, discharges happen smoother. But they also manage ICU utilization, which is a key operational insight from Simpson.
How so?
Not every sick patient needs an ICU bed. Sometimes they just need enhanced monitoring on the floor. The stat nurse can provide that expert oversight, keeping the patient in a lower-cost bed safely.
Ah, so they act as a gatekeeper. preventing inappropriate ICU transfers.
Precisely. ICU beds are the most extensive real estate in the whole hospital. You don't want to use one unless you absolutely have to. The stat nurse optimizes that resource.
This sounds like a dream for a chief financial officer. Which I guess leads us to the deeper business case. How does this model align with the big regulatory bodies and the actual payment structures?
This is where the rubber meets the road. Hospitals are under the microscope of organizations like CMS,
Centers for Medicare and Medicaid.
the Leapfrog Group, and Magnet.
Okay, let's start with CMS.
So CMS penalizes hospitals for high rates of readmissions, sepsis, mortality, all of it. Because the stat nurses focus on early recognition, they drive performance on those exact metrics. Better metrics mean better reimbursement.
But it goes even deeper, right? Into billing. You mentioned DRGs.
Yeah, DRG, diagnosis-related group. Let's break that down.
Please.
Okay, so very simply, when a patient comes in with pneumonia, the hospital gets paid a fixed amount for that case. Let's just call it $10,000.
A flat fee.
A flat fee. If the patient gets better in 3 days and goes home, great. The hospital keeps the margin.
But if things go wrong,
If that patient develops sepsis because signs were missed and they stay for 3 weeks, that care might cost the hospital $50,000. But insurance might still only pay the original 10 grand.
so the hospital eats a $40,000 loss.
The massive loss. The stat nurse protects that margin. It's pure cost avoidance. By preventing the complication, they keep the cost of care inside that reimbursement band.
And I saw something in the research about revenue integrity and documentation. It sounds a little dry, but I'm betting it's not.
It's incredibly lucrative. In our healthcare system, if you don't document it, it didn't happen, and you don't get paid for it.
And bedside nurses are too busy.
They're busy saving lives. So their documentation can be, rushed. The stat nurse makes sure the documentation reflects the true clinical picture.
So if a patient is sicker than the chart says, the hospital gets underpaid?
Correct. Or the insurance company just denies the claim entirely. The stat nurse is a real-time auditor saying, hey, write this down, this is happening. They are securing revenue that would otherwise just vanish.
It's amazing how this one role connects bedside care directly to the bottom line. It seems like such a no-brainer. What about the high reliability concept? We hear that buzzword a lot.
We do. Lots of hospitals say they're high-reliability organizations.
Places that operate in hazardous environments without mistakes.
Right. But often it's just a slogan on a poster in the break room. Safety first.
But slogans don't save lives.
Exactly. Simpson's model operationalizes high reliability. It puts a human scanner on the floor to constantly close safety gaps. It's not a poster. It's a person.
Which must align with things like magnet standards.
Perfectly. Magnet requires evidence of innovation and structural empowerment. This is the definition of that.
And we can't forget the patient experience in all this. We've talked numbers, but there are actual people in those beds.
And that's the HCHPS score patient satisfaction. When a family sees a dedicated expert come in, manage pain, explain what's going on, it just signals that the hospital is being proactive.
It signals we are watching out for you.
Right. And that drives satisfaction scores up, which again ties directly back to reimbursement.
Okay, let's bring it all home. We started with the chaotic image of a code blue, and we've journeyed to this idea of a stat nurse who operates in the quiet moments to prevent all that noise. Is this actually catching on?
It is. Because the improvements are so measurable, Timothy Simpson's model is expanding across multiple hospitals and health systems.
So leadership is buying in.
They're starting to see it not as a nice-to-have or an extra expense, but as a strategic leadership tool.
That's a key shift, from expense to investment.
It is, because it bridges the gap. You have the C-suite worrying about finance and metrics, and the bedside staff worrying about the patient right in front of them.
And they often speak different languages.
The stat nurse speaks both. They connect ICU-level expertise directly with the hospital's top priorities.
It really is that force multiplier concept coming to life. One person, but their influence just ripples out everywhere.
And here's the final thought I'd leave you with. We talk so much about safety. We buy expensive tech, we implement AI. But if true safety means proactive detection instead of heroic reaction, why are we still so addicted to the rescue model? Why are we still waiting for the alarm to ring?
That is the question. If your system relies on a button being pushed to save a life, maybe the system itself is what needs resuscitation.
Precisely. Every hospital leader should be asking, are we designed to rescue or are we designed to prevent? Simpson's work suggests that the most powerful technology for prevention, it isn't a machine. It's a nurse with the right mandate.
Powerful stuff. It makes you look at the hospital hallways a little differently. Instead of looking for the doctors running, maybe we should be looking for the nurse who is quietly walking and watching and preventing the need to run at all.
That's the goal.
That's all for today's deep dive. We hope this gave you a new perspective on what innovation can look like. Sometimes it's not a new gadget, but a new way of thinking about expertise. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep asking the hard questions.